When you take on a character, you have to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And what that means is you have to take certain elements of your own truth to put it into that character. And so there's been certain elements of truth that I've expanded to make it a little bit more imaginary and make it a little bit more heightened of an experience or an emotion, whether that be, more in like that angry direction or more in that like content direction. Those elements of truth have kind of sparked things about how I would react. Excuse me, I'm going to rephrase that. I have kind of figured out a couple things about how I've reacted certain ways in scene work that I didn't think I would react that way, but that's just how my body authentically reacted. And so figuring that out about myself, there's a couple scenes that I've done where the character is very independent, but something may trigger them in a way it kind of brings them back to their own world.
Okay, awesome. Kenzie, hi. Welcome to the Creator's Canvas.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, where I think I want to start the conversation is, when I was doing some research on you as a content creator, I noticed that you started back in early 2020. What was your headspace like, and why did you start making content?
That was around the time that COVID began, and I think I was just so caught up in my own little world that I needed some space to branch out to things. And a lot of especially performing arts opportunities, they kind of diminished. I was cast in a show in early March, and 2 weeks before rehearsals were scheduled to begin, that's when the shutdown happened. And so I was kind of feeling a little alone in my craft. And so one of my friends actually told me about TikTok and was like, "Hey, you should do this. This would be kind of cool for you. You can post videos and, just for fun and see what happens." And so I did that. And it kind of became a thing for me. And I started to meet some really cool people virtually. And over the years, it's kind of expanded into this nice, creative arts community that I've built. And they're all my friends, which is kind of cool.
With you being able to connect with people all over the world in this, quote unquote creative arts community that you talk about, what is a memorable, experience or conversation from that's top of mind for you? Because I'm the same way. The number of people I've connected with that I never would have, without social media is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I definitely have noticed the same 4 to 5 people that have been on my page and kind of following my journey since the beginning. So that's kind of wild to think about. And there was one person, his name is Paul, and we had been following each other for a little while, and then we finally, a year and a half later after following each other, we finally got to meet in person in the city and just kind
Oh
of
my gosh.
talk. And we walked around the city for 2 to 3 hours, and it was just so that kind of stuff is really, really cool. I also met one of my good friends at NYU. Her name is Madison, and she actually reached out to me via social media and was like, "Hey, I noticed you're going to NYU this fall. Do you want to get coffee or something? And I know this might be weird, but might be fun." I was like, "Cool, sure, why not?" And now, we're good friends. So it's just kind of weird how virtual communications can lead to something more. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kind of a crazy story from that on my end. So I got back from Europe about 3 weeks ago, shot interviews over there, and someone I met virtually actually helped me film when I was in Prague. So he's from the Czech Republic, and we had kept in touch, and he actually took a 3 hour train ride to meet me, which was nuts. And so we ended up hitting it off. I mean, I knew from the time we started talking online that we'd be really good friends, and so that was just, further solidified, when we met in person, which is really cool. So, Kenzie, for you, so you mentioned when you started creating content, you needed a place to kind of, have a community. And with it being COVID, everyone's in their own bubble. And so, when did you start shooting content just to shoot content to actually, try to be more intentional about it, kind of in the way that you do now?
Well, I've got to be honest with you. Even now, I don't post to get traction, or I don't
Mm.
post to reach a specific target audience. I
Hmm.
truly just post for fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I don't want to think of it as a job, because then it becomes boring, and it
Hmm.
then becomes this competition with oh, I need to do this and I need to, and it just becomes so, so stressful. There's been
Mhm.
times where I post 4 to 5 times a day because I'm like, this would be kind of cool, but like, I'm not expecting anything. And then there's times
Mhm.
where I go like 7 to 8 days without posting a single thing because the
Mm.
algorithm is it's so unpredictable. And so I'm just like, why waste the time and energy to figure out the algorithm that's never going to be figured out in the first place? And I find more success with that because I'm able to just kind of be myself and not worry about like putting up this it's hard to describe. It's hard to describe. I
Mm.
find more authenticity within myself when I just do it when I feel like it.
Mm.
And I find that people stick around for that too. So,
Yeah, and clearly from the, the audience that you've built in the community that you've talked about, which I think is incredible. So, kind of when I was looking at all the types of content that you have posted, it's such a wide range. I
yep.
love seeing things all the way from your sword fighting class, to
Oh,
all the
you
way
went
to
way
like
back. Oh gosh.
all the way to like the singing videos that that kind
Yeah.
of you mentioned that earlier, which is really cool. And so from that, what types of content do you love posting the most? You mentioned you love to post, kind of based on how you feel, and I would love to hear, what resonates most with you.
Think anything that involves storytelling. So it's a dance,
Mm,
sing, something that communicates something and makes somebody feel something,
mm,
whether it's a good feeling, a, a bad feeling, or kind of a neutral feeling, just something that evokes emotion from somebody. That could be very cathartic for an audience member. It's similar to live theater, even TV film, like that stuff makes people feel something. Especially in the last week, I've noticed that like just communicating something is the most effective way to get somebody to listen.
can you expand on that a little bit more? So communicating something is the best way to get to someone to listen. So do you mean like communicating it and trying to figure out in what way to say it that it'll land best with that person? Or
No, I meant like in songs, for example,
Mm,
there's a lot of singing trends that are like, little riffs and high notes and stuff like that. But if you can really make somebody feel something by communicating something,
mhm.
that's kind of where I found success. It's hard to
Oh,
describe.
interesting. And so, okay, so I'm starting to gather. That's fascinating. So, what is an example in your head?
The most recent thing is What Remains by Drew Gasparini. Actually, that is a really good example. What Remains by Drew Gasparini, because the first time that I posted anything related to that, it was a short snippet. It was 2 lines, two phrases, but they were filled with so much like need of trying to communicate something that I couldn't find the right words to, and so that resonated with people. And then when people were requesting the full thing, before I had time to record the full thing, I just included the riff. That sort of did well, but it didn't reach as many people as the full song did because it was communicating a full story, and that's what people resonated with.
I see. And so, why do you think telling stories is something that resonates so much with you?
I think it gives me a chance to relate to other people in a way that I probably wouldn't be been able to without it.
For me, why I think stories are so important to me is I think they are one of the best ways to help someone feel like seen, heard, felt, and appreciated. Because if you watch or listen to a story and there is an element to it that really speaks to an experience that you felt alone in, then I can't imagine like another form of experience that can make someone feel less alone. And that's why I think stories can be so powerful. And I think they're just such a more effective way to convey a message or lesson. We can lecture it or we can tell it in a story. Which one lands better?
Yeah, there's little morals to the story. I like it.
And so for you, what type of work are you excited to dive into in your semester coming up in August?
See, I like this question a lot. I haven't told really anybody about this, but I mean, I'm allowed to share it. I
Mm,
At NYU, they have like a fall musical and a spring musical, that kind of thing.
uh-huh.
And Joey Contreras, who is a very prominent music theater writer in the industry, he's written a song cycle. It's called In Pieces, and then he's also written some individual compositions for Broadway performers and people alike. And they're doing an original musical called Heartbreakers in Hell.
Mm.
And they had auditions for it, they had callbacks, and a girl ended up getting booked. So I get to do an original character, which is so cool to me.
Oh my
I think
gosh.
a bucket list item is kind of originating a role, so that way I am like I get to take on the material in a way that it's never ever been performed before because
Mhm.
it's never been performed. So I'm very excited for that opportunity. I'm very fortunate for that opportunity. But that starts in August. So that's kind of what I'm mainly looking forward to. And then this whole year is going to be focused on showcase and recital. And so that's kind of wild to think about. No more gen eds. We don't even get we get some classes, but it's a lot of it is just coaching instead of like full on acting classes or full on song analysis classes or script analysis stuff like that. It's all coaching based, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that 100% is, and first of all, congratulations. I
Oh,
could
thank you.
literally see how excited you were on your face, talking about that, and the fact that it is literally a bucket list item for you, and that's something that's coming up. I can't think of anything more special. And I think it's so beautiful in life to have something to look forward to. It's like, because like what's coming down the line is like, oh my gosh, can't wait. And so, what is the importance of playing an original character? And then, so this is where I don't know as much about, the work that you do.
I get to create my own circumstance work that
Really?
yeah, so the character is set. Like it's our, the character is in a circumstance, the character is in a plot, it's every but nobody has ever taken on the challenge of kind of bringing that character to life. And so being given the opportunity to
Mm.
bring the character from the page to the stage, rhymes. Okay. Bring the character from the page to the stage. That's just it's so fascinating because there is a decent amount of work that goes into that. And so
Hmm.
not having, something to go off of and just kind of creating it from your mind. It's kind of like choreography or even a writer, like taking an idea, a seed of an idea, and then blossoming it into a flower. It's kind of like that.
Mm.
You have this seed of a character, it's kind of written on the page, but you get
Yes.
the opportunity to bring it to its full length. You get to create
Mm.
the memories and you get to create the relationships and you get to create you get to do everything. And that is so cool to me.
That's actually amazing because I imagine that comes with a lot of responsibility. And for you, how do you think about how you approach bringing that character from the page to real life? Because I'm sure for every different person, they have a different way of how they would execute it. And I'm curious, how do you think about that for yourself?
Well, my first step would be to go through the script to figure out what's written. What did the author write about it first? What did the author
Hmm.
write about my character? Write that down. What does the character say about myself? Write that down. What do other characters say about my character? Write that down. And
Mm.
what do the stage directions tell about my actions versus my words? And that
Hmm.
once I write all of that down, just kind of compare and contrast to see, okay, what am I saying versus what am I doing? Because we all know that actions speak louder than words, and so that tells a
Yes.
lot about it. That tells a lot about a character. So I would do that, figure all of that out, and then from there, I would go through and based on the actions and the words that I've said in the show,
Hmm.
create my backstory. So who were my parents? Where was I born? It's a play about mythology, so it's not
Mm.
going to be
Oh,
like, oh,
awesome.
Sally lives, around the corner with her parents and goes to a K through 8 school. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be a little bit more
Yeah.
complex than that. But kind of going through and creating the moments before leading up to where I am now is going to be the coolest part about it.
Do you learn about yourself through playing different characters?
Oh, absolutely.
And what does that process look like? Because the thought had just occurred to me. If you have an example too of like something you've learned about yourself, like that's incredible.
Well, in when you take on a character, you have to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And what that means is you have to take certain elements of your own truth to put it into that character. And so there's been certain elements of truth that I've expanded to make it a little bit more imaginary
Mhm.
and make it a little bit more heightened of an experience or an emotion, whether that be, more in like that angry direction or more in that like content direction. Those elements of truth have kind of sparked things about how I would react. Excuse me, I'm going to rephrase that. I have kind of figured out a couple of things about how I've reacted certain ways in scene work that I didn't think I would react that way, but that's just how my body authentically reacted. And so figuring that out about myself, there's a couple scenes that I've done where the character is very independent, but you know, something may trigger them in a way it kind of brings them back to their own world. And that's, you know, I've kind of example of 4,000 Miles by Amy Herzog. She's the character is a very independent person, but when it feels like her world is falling apart, she starts to become dependent on the only thing she knows. And so that I didn't think I would relate to that, but after completing that scene, like 4 weeks, I kind of resonated with the character a little bit more so than I thought I would have before taking it on.
Once you realized that you actually resonate with this character more than you initially thought, did that trigger some sort of like reflection within yourself or learning or, self-discovery?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it allows me to kind of branch out into new discoveries about myself.
So, Kenzie, I would love to hear if there are any stories that come top of mind for you as to a time where you learned a lot about yourself through like a specific character or experience that you had, in kind of all of the work that you do.
You know, I'm going to use this most recent one. So I just finished my second semester at NYU, and in the grad acting 2 class, we
What does
spent
that
the
term mean?
entire
Sorry, explain.
term on Meisner work. When I did a year. It's called Meisner technique, Sanford Meisner. And in acting, there's a couple different methods. You know, you've got the Stanislavski method. You've got different techniques and methods within acting. You've got the Stanislavski method. You've got the Sanford Meisner technique. You've got Uta Hagen. You know, the 6 steps to acting. And there's different approaches and methods click with people and some methods don't. For me, the Meisner technique kind of clicked with me. I had been studying Stanislavski for a few years before I touched on Meisner. And I did it the last year of my undergrad at Western Oregon University. But in this second semester, getting back on that train of thought, in the second semester of NYU, we did the entire class was just focused on Meisner, and we were assigned
Wow.
one C partner throughout the entire term. It was a 4-month long term, and we spent half of the term doing like Meisner technique exercises, and then we implemented that into the scene work. And that scene we did act for like the last scene of The Seagull by Anton Chekhov, and that experience as a whole, it was so kind of eye-opening to myself as a person, but also who Nina, my character, who Nina is as a person. It allowed me to find different like physical, like intricate details within, or like what is the word you use? Where you're like, it's not intricacy. It's like if someone's like wiggling their fingers, but they
Okay.
don't realize they're
Oh,
doing it. Mannerisms, I
quirks,
guess,
mannerisms.
like the
Yeah.
little intricate mannerisms. Yeah, sure. Quirks, manners, the stuff that like you don't like you do subconsciously. I was able to find those little like tiny
Oh,
details within Nina throughout the entire term
interesting.
because I was able to. So it wasn't just like I'm going to do a
Yeah.
monologue, work on it for like a week and be, you know what I mean? It was like I spent 4 months trying to get as like honest as possible with myself, and then once I dove into the scene itself, got my backstory, got my circumstance, got everything I needed, then I could use the Meisner technique to really respond authentically and truly as Nina, but like the inner
Mm.
self of Kenzie stepped into the inner self of Nina, and I have never done that before. So it was kind of weird but cool at the same time because I was able to like really like I was able to connect with my scene partner more so than I think I've ever connected with any scene partners, because we had that like Meisner exercise foundation for 2 months prior, and then the last 2 months were just focused on the scene. And it wasn't just like running lines repetitively. It was like we would do repetition with like say one person says I like cheese and pickles. It's a random sentence. but say one person says, I like cheese and pickles, and the next person's line is like, I like pickles and cheese. One person would say, I like cheese and pickles. The next person would repeat, I like cheese and pickles. But you wouldn't change unless you're motivated to, which I think, and that's just one part of Meister. There's a bunch of different elements to it. But that's just like one
Mm.
example of doing that the way we worked. We didn't just like block it and run it repetitively with like just the blocking. We would like there's a lot of trains of thought, but that particular experience doing Meisner with the
Mhm.
same scene partner, that was different in my undergrad, which I think both sides of the spectrum are really, really great. But in my undergrad, we were assigned a new partner like every class. Like we worked with 2 to 3 people every single class, and
Mm.
that we were on term instead of semester. So term basis is like
Mhm.
the weeks, they're like 11 weeks as opposed to 16. So you have a fall, a winter, and a spring term. That was Western. In NYU, we're on semester basis, so it's a 16-week long course to fall and spring. And so with that being said, I was getting, 11 weeks, I was working with, like, if I worked with 2 people every class
Mhm.
or 3 times a week, I was working with 6 people a week, different people every week, as opposed to one
Mm.
partner the
Interesting.
entire 16 weeks. And the
Yep.
entire 16 weeks, it allowed me to really, really connect with that person, both like as Kenzie, Kenzie and the scene partner, but also taking that connection that I had built and that trust that I built with that person and bringing it into the scene work. So that's like a very long winded, but that's one example of how I was like,
Beautifully said. So it sounds like the first part of what you said is the ability to understand the little intricacies of yourself that you weren't aware of initially because you do them subconsciously, like we all do, which is so fascinating. I just had a conversation with a friend last night, and I was talking to her about how it's so interesting to hear from other people about how and what they observe about us because we can't look at ourselves. And the second, which is really cool, is you were so used to switching scene partners for every class, but then have the ability to work with one scene partner and build that trust for extended period of time. Sounds like that was very impactful for you. So, how do you kind of think about the pros and cons of like each situation? So one is, working with one for a long time, and the other is, switching every class.
I think switching every class is beneficial because you're able to
Hmm.
kind of bounce off different personalities and test how you work with others at a more frequent rate. And so you've got to get used to working with different personalities. You've got to get used to,
Hmm.
kind of bouncing off different people at a time. But on the flip side, working with one person the entire duration, it allows you to really set some like
Mm.
foundation with the person you're going to be working with in the scene. And so you're able to gain a trust that for me, I was not able to get that
Mm.
level of trust switching partners every week because it was like I'm reestablishing things. I'm reestablishing boundaries, and I have to, I can't just like kind of fall into routine, which could also be a con
Ah.
with working with
Mm.
one person. You could become complacent with that person. So working with multiple people, you don't get complacent because you're always on
Yes.
your toes. You're always trying to like, stay on top of things and like actively listen, which is part of Meisner. You have to actively listen, and so you're having to actively listen to the different mannerisms and the different verbs that people, different actions that people are taking. But with one person, you're able to kind of establish that foundation and get a trust that you would not have been able to get with the multiple people. So I think doing both is really important because you get both sides of the spectrum. In certain plays that only have like 4 people, a 4,000 miles is the top thing in my head right now. That show, it only has 4 people. And so you're going to be working with the same 4 people. And in some cases, you're going to be working with the same
Hmm.
singular person for a very long period of time. If it's a 4 week rehearsal process or 3 week rehearsal process, it's not that long, but you're going 8 hours a day. So you're going to be with them for quite some time. So, studying with one person is very, very beneficial. But if you're in a show like, the prom, where you have many, many, many people that you're working with and many people that especially if
Hmm.
you're like ensemble and you're having to communicate with different characters at a time, also very beneficial to get that.
So, Kenzie, what are the best parts of you that are brought out when you have been able to develop that trust with a scene partner?
I am able to kind of have a lot of
Mm.
empathy with that person and actively listen to their needs and
Mhm.
concerns rather than just focusing on what I need and
Ah.
what my concerns are. When I'm working with multiple people, I am so focused on what is my objective or what do I need from them. And it's so quick that it goes by so fast. And so I'm not able to like really focus on what that other person needs. And so working with that one person, it allows me to kind of just take a step back and realize that I'm not the only person in the room, that somebody else is too.
The greater theme that I'm able to pull out from what you just said is it's this idea of being completely in service to the other person versus thinking about being in service to yourself.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I agree. Putting all of the
Mhm.
attention on your other is that's I mean, that is the biggest thing I've
Mm.
learned actually. Because if you're focused on your other and not yourself, you become selfless as opposed to
Mm.
selfish. But even if it's like even if let's see, for example, say your goal is to like to get this person to give you a candy bar
Yeah.
just for fun, you're still focused on them because you're getting them to give you something as opposed to, oh, I need to do this
It
to.
does.
Does that make sense? Focusing on others, that is the main thing.
Okay, so I'm super passionate about this topic because isn't it crazy that the best scene that we can build is whenever we're being in service to the other versus being in service to ourselves? Because inherently, we wouldn't think that would be the case, right? And I would love your thoughts on this. So, had lunch with we call him my grandpa, but he's not blood related, but my grandpa and his wife, both 80 years old, been married for 50 years. And I asked him, what has been the secret to the longevity of y'all's relationship? And he said, service to the other was always put at the forefront for both people. And he said, him and his wife said that they feel like that's what's lost on, like today's generation. And was curious to ask you, why do you think that's a concept that maybe our generation struggles with so much?
Well, I think our generation is just
Mhm.
a lot more independent now. I think that there should be a balance. Like, you shouldn't be completely selfless because if you consistently do things for others and you
Mhm.
never do anything for yourself, you're going to go cuckoo bananas and you're not going to be happy. I mean, you have to be happy with yourself before you can be happy with someone else. That's just my personal opinion, and you can take it
Mm.
or leave it. But in a relationship, there needs to be give and take from both sides, both parties. But there also needs to be a balance between
Mm.
selfishness and selflessness. Like, there needs to be compromises. Like, you can't just do everything for the other person and that other person do everything for that person because it's just going to be this like one-sided
Yeah.
thing. You know what I mean? You need to have a balance. Like, if you want to go to the movies, and I'm taking really, really like lowball examples. I don't want to get too deep with this, but
Uh,
if you want to go to the movies, but your
yeah.
person wants to go to dinner, maybe you do both, or maybe you choose to go to the movies on Friday and dinner on Saturday. So that way you're both happy, but you make a compromise. That's what I think should happen. I don't think we should be entirely selfless and do everything for our person because that it's not a partnership at that point. It's just like oh, I'm your servant. It's like, no, there needs to be a compromise. There needs to be a balance. It's like kind of like a
Mhm.
work home life balance. Like, I'm very
Mm.
career oriented, very career oriented. However, I try to balance my friendships and my relationships, whether they're, parental, sibling, friend, instructor, romantic, whatever it is. I try to balance that and weave
Mhm.
it into my career life. So that way I'm not just like headstrong, nothing else matters to me except the
Mm.
performing art. It's like, no, you got to have a balance. Same with relationships. I don't think you should be like headstrong on being like, oh, I want this and I want this and I want this. Or the opposite, you want this, so I'm going to give it to you. You want this, you want this, because it just becomes tiring for one person. Like, if you're completely selfish the entire time, your person is going to feel like they don't matter. But if you're the opposite and you're like, you only matter, then it's like, what? You both need to matter. Your voices both matter.
So what you're saying, I completely agree. And it's interesting to think about how that concept not only applies in your work, but there's like greater themes of it in like life in general, you know?
Yeah.
And, with scene work, how do you personally find that balance then of, being selfless and selfish?
I think
Mm.
actively listening to
Mm-hmm.
your partner, similar in like real life relationships, actively listening to what their
Yes.
needs and concerns are, but also taking into consideration how they can mesh with your needs and concerns, and then going from there. So, like in the seagull, for example, I had an ultimate goal and objective that I needed to fulfill, and that was the reason I was even
Mm-hmm.
there in the first place, right? There's a need to be there. But in a way, in order to get what I needed, I still needed to hear
Mm.
the other person out. And so even though I needed something, I need to actively listen to what the other person is saying as well. And how we can compromise.
Oh, okay. So what has active listening and helping your scene partner taught you about presence? And then how has that presence translated to real life, in your relationships and your interactions?
Yeah. Well, I'm able to I don't really think much about myself
Oh,
anymore. I
so
think about
interesting.
what I it's a balance, like I said earlier. I mean, I do think about what I like to do and what I want to do with my
Of
life, or
course.
like in certain relationships, like what I want in the relationship. But I think a lot of my training has allowed me to be a little bit more conscious of others' feelings and
Mm,
how they work, and not necessarily living for that, but living in
mm,
harmony with that. I'm able to um, kind of see a little bit more of the world than
mm,
I did before, because I'm able to kind of open my eyes and take in a lot as opposed to just beelining
mhm,
in my own direction. If that makes sense. And so I'm able to connect with a lot more people that way, because I am seeing them for who they are as
mm.
opposed to seeing them for who I want them to be.
When's the last time you have felt seen for who you are?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say a few days ago. I know it's so silly, and it's just a comment on a social media, okay? And I will say, I will preface this. I will preface this. My sister makes me feel
Mhm,
loved for who I am. Shout out to Madeline. I love you. My friends make me feel loved. I feel love from a lot
mhm,
of different places. But most recently, a couple days ago, somebody commented on my TikTok saying that I am a true storyteller. I'm gonna cry. Don't cry. I have been working so hard to be a storyteller in all aspects, whether it's acting, singing. Well, acting is storytelling, but you get what I mean. Dancing and everything. I am a true storyteller, and nobody's really ever said that to me. And so that was kind of a moment where I felt like, wow, you really do see that. That's kind of cool. I am a storyteller. And I know it's so silly. It's just a comment, but like it kind of made my day.
Kenzie, that isn't silly at all. What does
Very emotional.
emotions are beautiful, and I think they come through very strongly through the work that you do, and from doing that, it makes viewers emotional, Kenzie, So I think it's a superpower. What does the true part of that comment mean to you? Because that's interesting, right?
I think the idea of like authenticity within work
Mm,
is the most truest part, because I mean authentic means real, it means true, it means, like fully just open. But I would say that's like the most realist part of that comment is just, I mean, they basically called me authentic, which
mm.
is super, super cool, especially when I'm taking on a character that is
Yes.
completely
Oh,
fictional.
fascinating points.
Bringing authenticity into
Fascinating
a
point.
fictional character is kind of cool. Not kind of, it's very cool.
Has there been a time where you caught yourself not being an authentic storyteller, and not saying that it came from a place of intentionally trying to be, fake or mislead, but more so some
Hmm.
other, reason, as to how why that happened? Yeah.
American Idol. Just two words. American
Wait,
Idol.
so what's the story behind that?
Oh boy. Well, if you're listening to this, please do not go watch my American Idol episode. No, I was just joking. That whole experience, I think
Interesting.
American Idol, I think any reality TV show is kind
Mm,
of phony. I will say, because I don't want to bag on American Idol. It was a really, really cool opportunity, and I'm very, very appreciative. And if I were to get the opportunity to do it again, wink, wink, I, I would do it because I
mhm.
kind of know what to expect now, and I know how to
Yeah.
be on the set. I think I think that experience, it was great. It was awesome. But on the flip side, it was I mean, there's a lot of stage
Yes.
stuff going on. And you think I would thrive in that because it's theater, it's film, it's TV, it's different than that. I was so scared that I put up a
Mm.
front, and the front kind of made me look cuckoo bananas. And I know I've said that term twice now.
Cuckoo bananas,
Great.
that's my new favorite word.
Um, yeah, cuckoo bananas. I say that with the kids all the time. The kids that I nanny, guy, cuckoo banana, you're cuckoo
Of
bananas in
course.
a fun way. It's always a joke. It made me like I put on this like facade that it truly made me look like a different
Mm.
person. I went back to school the week after it aired, and people were like, "Uh, what happened to you?" And then people on my social media were like, "Oh, you're so different on your pages than you are." And
Oh,
I mean, it was also heightened because I did some like amateur ventriloquism, which, by the way, I have never taken ventriloquist. I mean, I've
yeah.
taken like one lesson, but it was for a show that I did when I was 12. So that's why I always lead with like, I'm amateur. I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. It's just for fun, right? But they had me do all these different things, and they had me braid my hair like 8 times before going in, and so my hair was all poofy, and there's just a lot of like things that went into it behind the scenes that a lot of people
Mhm.
don't know about when it aired. And I'm not saying it was good, I'm not saying it was bad, it's just
Yeah.
kind of neutral. It's just kind of how reality TV works, because again, I don't want to bag on American Idol. It was a great opportunity. I'm so appreciative for it, so appreciative. But it came with some like
Yes.
phoniness from me because I was trying to be something that
Mm.
I was not. A great example is the song that I sung. I had sang it like 6 times before
Mhm.
that. Like, I auditioned with it and I got through, which is cool. But like, I'd never had any vocal training on that particular song. Never worked with a vocal coach. I was like, I at the time, because it was filmed in 2021, October 2021, but it didn't air until May. Oh, sorry, not May, March
Mhm.
of 2022. And so, there was a good chunk of time in there between when it was recorded. But at the time, in October 2021, I had just started to learn, the mixed belt. And I just started to, like, find different resonances and, like, how to not control it, but, like, within different songs, how to, like, I had just started to find the mixed belt. And so I'm going back to repeat so I can finish the thought. At the time, I wasn't super comfortable with the, in quotations, mixed belt quite yet, because I had just learned it like a year prior, a year
Mm.
and a half prior. So I was still a work in progress. And so the song that I chose, I was so scared that I was going to bomb it that I was like, okay, I have to do something. And mind you, I hadn't worked vocally on it with a coach, and I hadn't worked it circumstance work wise. I hadn't worked anything. And so I was like, okay, if I just do something, then I will be fine, because I'm not going to be focused on my voice. I'm going to be focused on like everything else that I'm doing. And so because I didn't put in circumstance work, and because I wasn't trying to act it, but I went in there and I looked like I was mad the whole time, because, and like the faces that I made, it was hard to watch. But it was fun. I blacked out. I don't remember anything except for like two words that one of the judges said. But it was a very interesting experience, because I was not myself. I was trying to sing and trying to be what I thought
Mm,
everybody else wanted me to be. But since then, and it's been almost it'll in a few months it'll be 2 years two
mhm,
years since the filming of it. I have found out a lot about my voice
mm,
in general, the genres that it fits, and also I have kind of taken a lot of the pressure off of trying to sound like certain people or certain things and just putting my own
mm.
spin on things. And if people like it, great. If people don't like it, great. Like, I just, you know what I
100%.
mean? So I think that experience as a whole, American Idol, it was great. It was a great, but it also kind of didn't set me back or put me forward. It was just very neutral. I didn't lose opportunities. I didn't gain opportunities. It just was kind of there. But it allowed me to kind of see who I am
Mhm.
as a person and what I want to do, who I want to be as a person and a performer.
Who do you want to be as a person and performer, Kenzie?
I want to be myself for people to connect to, and
Beautifully said.
that's it.
It's so fascinating because it sounds like the American Idol experience was a mix of two different things. One was, being something that you thought you needed to be, plus, kind of the whole industry of reality TV and how things are cut and staged and, presented so that it's entertaining, for an audience. And so that in combination was like, oh my gosh, like who is that on screen?
Yeah.
At the same time, I think it's fascinating because you going through that, I think has helped you grow so much into being that authentic version of yourself that resonates with people so much. And so I love this concept of taking an experience that maybe wasn't the best and then extrapolating lessons learned from that and incorporating that to then be that version of ourselves that we want, which I think is beautiful. So Kenzie, as we're wrapping up on time, we love to end off on this question. Is there anything you wish that people knew about you? And the reason that we like this question is because with the Creators Canvas, we try our best to humanize content creators. Oftentimes, an audience can put distance between themselves and content creators that they love watching. And we're just like, hey, actually, we're no different than you guys, you know?
Yeah, I'm human. I go through struggles just like anybody else. I have love and I've had heartbreak. I even though I seem for videos especially I'll post the best takes, but sometimes those takes will take 40 minutes as
Mm,
opposed to the 1 20-second clip you see. Sometimes I just want to cry, and that's okay,
mm.
and then other times I am very elated to do the things that I do. We've got hills and valleys. I'm human, and I think that's the biggest thing that anyone needs to take away from this is that we all are human. That's all we are. Some people are put on bigger pedestals than other, but some people are put on bigger pedestals than other people. But they shouldn't. I mean, we're all human, and we all do what we can to survive.
Beautifully said, Kenzie. Thank you so much for coming on the Creators Canvas. I really love the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.